The ocean never stopped moving. Long after the sirens faded and the camper van was towed away, the cliffs and Pacific coastline kept their rhythm, indifferent to the life that had been lost there decades ago. Travelers pulled over at scenic turnouts, unaware that just a few years ago, or, more accurately, 40 years ago, a young woman's life had been ended with violence. The coastline, golden in the sun and relentless in its tides, had become a witness, silent yet unbroken. Dorothy, Toby, Tate's name had been reduced to a cold case number. A file sat in a storage room. Brown paper bags labeled with her name contained evidence that, at the time, investigators had no way to fully understand. Among those items was a simple aluminum Coca-Cola can. Ordinary. Forgettable. But it held the touch of someone who thought no one would ever trace it back to them. The 1980s had been a different era. Forensic science existed, but the tools were limited. Fingerprints were compared manually, through ink cards and filing cabinets. DNA was just beginning to emerge as a technology, mostly experimental, certainly not widely used in criminal investigation. At the time, the fingerprints lifted from Toby's camper van could not be matched to anyone. The blood evidence collected could not yield a full profile. For decades, the case went cold. The ocean continued its rhythm. Seasons passed. Investigators retired. Generations grew up thinking that Toby's disappearance might never be solved. And yet, the evidence waited. When cold case investigators reopened her file decades later, they were stepping back into history, into 1984, with tools they could not have imagined. Modern fingerprint databases connected millions of prints across states and decades. DNA sequencing and forensic genealogy had transformed what was once impossible into something methodical, almost inevitable. A profile developed from preserved blood samples revealed a male contributor. That DNA would not simply disappear, it would eventually find a path forward, like a whisper waiting to be amplified. Investigative genealogy is painstaking. A match does not appear instantly. Instead, distant relatives appear, their connection faint but measurable in percentages. Genealogists trace back through censuses, marriage records, obituaries, public family trees, and social history. They construct branches of life that may seem disconnected until the pattern forms. For Toby, the path led investigators to Texas, to Stephen Richard Hardy. Hardy had lived at the right time, in the right place, with a history that suggested he could have been present in California in 1984. But he had died years before the breakthrough. Confirmation required more than DNA. It required convergence. The Coca-Cola can, long overlooked, now became central. Its latent prints were entered into modern automated systems. A match appeared. Charlie Sneed, another man from Texas, also deceased. Two separate individuals connected independently to the scene, one through blood, one through fingerprints. And both had been long gone. Investigators then pieced together the likely relationship between the two men. Records suggested shared travel, shared time in California, overlapping social circles. And now, decades later, their presence intersected with a crime that had haunted families and investigators alike. The timeline of Toby's life and death, once a vague mystery, began to take shape. The men's perspective, as much as we can infer, is chilling. For decades, they likely thought the event was buried in memory and time. They lived through birthdays, jobs, and ordinary days while Toby's life was forever frozen on that turnout along the Pacific Coast Highway. They carried the memory of that encounter, perhaps unspoken, perhaps rationalized. Meanwhile, Toby's family carried a different weight. Decades of uncertainty, grief stretched over years, unanswered questions that could not be reconciled. And yet, evidence never forgets. The fingerprints, the blood, the archived objects, all waited, quietly, patiently. Technology eventually caught up. What had been indecipherable in 1984 became undeniable in 2026. The case would not simply fade into history. Toby's story is more than a solved crime. It is a testament to persistence. To the idea that even small details, a soda can, a preserved sample, a latent print, can survive decades and speak when no one else can. It is also a warning to those who think time shields actions. Time can conceal, but it does not destroy. The Pacific Coast Highway remains scenic, golden, serene. Travelers stop, take photos, admire the horizon. They do not know that a tragedy occurred there. But for those who study cold cases, those who understand the patience of forensic science, this location holds proof of something deeper. Justice may not arrive quickly, but it arrives eventually. The case announcement came quietly. There was no TV special, no courtroom, no dramatic confession. Both suspects, Hardy and Sneed, were long deceased. And yet, in that quiet confirmation, there was profound weight. Because for 40 years, uncertainty had ruled. Questions loomed. Who did this? Why? Could it ever be solved? Now, there was an answer. Not a sentence. Not a trial. But an answer. For Toby's family, that answer was transformative. It replaced speculation with fact. Rumors with evidence. And while it did not restore her life, it restored narrative. It restored certainty to decades of grief. This is the human side of cold cases, what investigators often cannot capture in reports. The emotional toll on families who wait decades is immeasurable. Each holiday missed. Each birthday unshared. Each unanswered. Why? That stretches endlessly across time. But there is also a psychological truth for the perpetrators. Hardy and Sneed may have carried a secret for years, thinking they had erased themselves from history. They may have assumed that isolation along the Pacific, combined with a lack of immediate forensic capability, guaranteed freedom. But in reality, time was preparing the tools to expose them. DNA does not forget. Fingerprints persist. Evidence can outlive its handlers. And modern forensic science, combined with meticulous record-keeping, is relentless in seeking connections. The Pacific Coast Highway is beautiful. Yet every scenic turnout holds the memory of what happened there. These landscapes, though timeless, are witnesses. They are silent reminders that actions leave traces. Traces that wait. And eventually, someone or something will notice. Toby's story is more than a murder case. It is a lesson about patience, about truth, about the way justice sometimes arrives decades late. A soda can. Preserved blood. 2 men long gone. And yet, resolution came. There is a haunting duality here. The tragic loss of a young woman contrasted with the inevitability of eventual discovery. It reminds us that even the most ordinary objects, aluminum cans, paper files, latent fingerprints, can become extraordinary instruments of truth. For viewers, the moral is clear. Time may delay, but it does not erase. And justice, even delayed, matters. The broader implication stretches beyond Toby's case. Across the country, cold cases sit in filing cabinets, evidence waiting patiently. And for families still waiting, Toby's story offers hope. The truth can arrive when least expected. Her life, her story, her journey along the highway now resonates as more than tragedy. It is a narrative of persistence, from investigators who refused to give up, from forensic scientists who innovate, from families who never stopped hoping. And it is a reminder. No crime truly disappears. It leaves traces. Those traces can survive decades. And sometimes, they speak louder than any witness ever could. As the Pacific winds continue to blow across the cliffs where Toby once parked her van, her story reminds us all. Even in the quietest corners of history, the truth waits. And when it arrives, it is profound, emotional, and undeniable. Cold cases are not endings. They are pauses. And the pause may be long. But eventually, it can end. And justice, finally, can speak. If you haven't subscribed, click the subscribe button so you don't miss out on chilling true crime cold cases as this.